5 of the most highly played videos ever on MTV. So those 5 videos alone equated to a lot of Buco Dolores. So like Dave said, though, it blows up the ego and there's a lot of money involved, and he wanted the band to be like in the background while he does his jokey movie, and the band was like, what, are you fucking kidding me? I'm not doing that. And Ed wanted to branch out anyway, and it just came time. It was a lot of factors there. Money certainly had a big factor. Letter number 15, Dave, comes from James Harrison. James says, hi, Double Daves. I apologize for the delay getting back to you. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in your anniversary show. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do so at the time due to some medical issues in my family. I originally thought of doing something musical, as I am a musician, but that seemed to be too self-serving. Then I thought about, why not inject a little humor in my offering? Hopefully you guys can still use it. He's talking about the last episode we had the listeners do all these different anniversary messages, and feel free to omit any parts you don't like. If you can't use it, I understand, no worries. I have found the time to listen to your most recent podcast to hear what your listeners contributed, so I hope mine is not too far off the mark. Side note, why don't you give yourself nicknames like your listeners have done, like Numbers or Monkey Man, or for Quiet Dave or Loud Dave could be like Davey Dynamite, or perhaps Davey Dangerous. Oh my God. Please let Quiet Dave know that the Monkees are touring. Everybody's concerned about this, Dave. They are coming to Birmingham this fall, and I grew up watching their television show, and I'm so planning on making that concert. Thank you very much for all your hard work you guys put into this show. You guys remind me very much of the relationship my brother and I have. We are constantly discussing music, especially Van Halen. I love this show. All the best to the Atomic Daves. James Harris. Thank you, James. That was very nice of you. Very sweet. Yeah, we'll play your anniversary message, and here's his message right now.
Hey, Double Daves! This is Top Jimmy James from the great state of Alabama. Hey, dudes, the tide is high, and so am I. I just wanted to let you guys know how much I love the Unchained podcast. I have listened to every minute of every episode. Nobody rules the podcast world like the Atomic Daves. You guys keep waving that flag high and proud for the mighty Van Halen. And by the way, a big congratulations on your 5th year anniversary. You guys are awesome. I live my life like there's no tomorrow. That's why I listen to Dave and Dave.
Awesome, Jimmy. Thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible, and I will be using that in the future for bumpers. Well, I tell you, we let the listeners give us our nicknames. They called us Loud Dave and Quiet Dave. We don't call each other that. That just came from you guys, so that's what we go with. I think it's funny because calling Dave Quiet Dave is like calling me Skinny Dave, which is kind of funny. It's more fun that way than us giving us our names. But what do you think, Dave?
I got enough people calling me names, so I don't need to give myself anymore.
Yeah, I know. Oh, boy. Letter number 16 comes from Lane Spencer. Thank you so much for your awesome podcast. I look forward to it every month. During the lockdown, I wrote a short story about a middle-aged guy struggling with life during lockdown. He listens to a podcast and Distanced by Mammoth WVH while sorting out his life. The podcasters are partially based on you, and I hope you will read it. Not on the podcast. Give me your thoughts. Lane Spencer from San Diego, California. Well, Lane sent us an entire short story. I'm not going to read it on here. It's way too long for sure. But he did a really nice job on it, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you for the short story, Lane. I appreciate you using us for inspiration. Those guys, I would say, the podcasters in the story, get a little way more personal than Dave and I do. We're always talking more about the music and the band. A lot of these podcasts, I don't know if you recognize this, Dave, but a lot of podcasts, they spend like the first 25 minutes of the podcast just talking about their own personal shit. It's hysterical. However, I think your story really struck an emotional chord, that's for sure. Maybe because I'm like the same age as the guy in the story, but I'm a very nostalgic kind of dude, and that kind of stuff really tears me up. You did a great job. Well done. I think there's some really cool stuff in there. What do you think, Dave?
I thought the story was really interesting.
Yep.
Few twists and turns.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm of that generation too. So, yeah, you're right about the emotional chord. Some things in there that was really a heart tugger there.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I was like, and then there was one, and you're like, wow. And then, then there's another one. It's like, wow, he's not letting up on this.
No, I know.
So thank you for taking the time to write it and send it in. We really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And letter number 17, Dave. You know it was coming, and here he is.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's
Midwest fucking Ron. That's right. Midwest fucking Ron comes in with a triple play, Dave. 3 letters in one. I put them all together. First of all, he wanted to write you to congratulate you on your purchase of Sammy Hagar's Lake Arrowhead property, and that you bought for $3.1 million, and he was very excited about that. So he was congratulating you. As always, he's praising you. And
I'll be sure to invite Ron to the house.
Oh, I know. I think you got enough bedrooms to dedicate just to the Rons themselves. They can have their own.
That's true.
There's plenty in there.
They can stay in separate rooms over there.
That's right.
I'll have room for you, and everybody else.
That's right. We're going to have the next Van Halen bash at Dave's Lake
That's
Arrowhead.
Right.
There you go. That's the next one. So he also wanted to tell us there's a way to view the enhanced Eddie Van Halen mural that Robert Vargas did. He says if you put this photo on your screen and point your phone at it when accessing this URL, and he gave it to us. I'm going to post that up on the website. Ron just giving people a little tip as how they can experience that mural coming to life. Now, we talked about Robert Vargas from our last episode. That was phenomenal. And of course, Ron, he's got to get a little dig in here, man. Ron, it's not Ron unless he gives me a little jab. So he says, not surprising that Dave C. doesn't remember the Med Anthony Express. It didn't swing out east or west in the fall of 2007, but they did open for Sammy on 20 dates. And here's a clip of Michael Anthony doing Hear About It Later. Now, the band was comprised of Michael Anthony on bass and lead vocals, plus Vic Johnson on guitar and John J.D. Douglas on drums. He's correcting us here, Dave, because if you remember, we said David Lauser.
Oh, yeah. I think he might have been Sam's percussionist and drum tech on that tour, but he's also Alex Van Halen's drum tech, and I would love to interview that guy since he's been on both sides of the fence.
Oh,
he must
really?
Have great stories. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna try. Maybe I can try to reach him, but the only problem is he's got that common name. Might be hard to find.
Well, he'd be worth the interview. That guy would totally be worth the interview.
Absolutely. Letter number 18 comes from Darren McGuire, which he calls himself DQ Magoo, and he says, hey guys, sorry I couldn't get the recording in for the anniversary birthday celebration. Time got away from me as my fiscal year had wrapped up in April. Anyway, happy belated birthday, Quiet Dave. I don't know why he's wishing you happy birthday. That was months ago, but I really enjoyed last month's podcast, and it came at a great time as COVID has started to swing down. Last month, my work travel schedule started to ramp back up, and the podcast is always a welcome addition to any long trip. Anyway, I started noticing something about 5 years ago in various airports in McDonald's. It hit me in the face again this month. In the cafe section, they have many red and white striped walls, even seen a few of these with white and black striped walls. As far back as I can remember, the Van Halen legal camp has been ruthless about anything regarding trademark or copyright. They even shut down Alex's ex-wife from using her last name for selling towels, for Christ's sake. When Eddie passed, that legal machine went into overdrive, stopping the flow of knockoff striped and pictured items looking to grab a quick buck. This scorched earth policy even led to some things that had no connection with the band or Eddie's image receiving cease and desist letters. I'm no lawyer, but in looking at these McDonald's walls, I don't know how anyone could possibly think a case could not be made for trademark, unless Eddie's signature stripes are not trademark. What do you say? Keep up the great work. DQ Magoo. So listen, this is really interesting. So it's hard to explain this to a person without seeing it. These are like these, and they're almost like screens. They kind of dividers that, divide areas up, and it does look like Eddie's stripes. However, This is what I personally think, Mr. DQ. I think the person who designed them is definitely a Van Halen fan, but I think what they did was they probably came as close to the pattern as they could, but not close enough to sue. You know, sometimes they do stuff like that. I'll give an example. Remember when Van Halen did the Crystal Pepsi commercial with Right Now? Well, what happened with that was they were going to use a song that kind of ripped off Right Now without fully ripping off Right Now. So the way that happens is they get close to the song. It's kind of got the vibe of the song, but it does not have the melodic full hook. And there is a very tricky way of doing this where you get close enough that someone recognizes the familiarity there, but you don't go close enough as to where you're going to get sued. And the reason why Van Halen let them use Right Now for Crystal Pepsi was they were like, oh, we're going to do this anyway. So they decided, well, we might as well get the money for it. We might as well just use the song. And that's how that all happened. However, it might be something like that. If you look at these screens that he's showing us here, they're close to the pattern. And Eddie definitely has copyrighted the pattern. He owns that thing. I don't even know how you own that, but that's fine. It's red with white stripes and a little bit of black. But as you notice, there's no black in this one. The stripes are in a different position, and it's like not as many stripes. And so there's little touches that you can kind of tiptoe in and out in order to legally remain safe. So what do you think, Dave?
I'm no lawyer. And, I really wonder if it was just like some big coincidence. It was close, but not quite the same. So,
yeah, well, maybe.
So who knows?
Yes. Well, we've gotten to Dave's favorite portion of the evening, the last letter, because he is ready to sack out. I feel the sleepy time tea in his throat. He's drinking it. He's got his nightcap on. His teddy bear is in his left arm, and he's about to knock out. So we're going to go letter number 19, coming from...
That's fairly accurate, by the way. Yeah.
That's right. Letter number 19, Jason the Dwayson Bay. And he says, do you think that the Sammy stuff would sound less poppy if he grew up in the Van Halen camp? Let's say he was the first singer in Van Halen in the 70s. Would they have done something more in the vein of the Circle or Chicken Foot? It seems like the pop sensibilities really came out in Van Halen during Sammy's stuff prior to that, but much of it wasn't nearly as poppy as Van Hagar, which led me to believe that Eddie has way more influence on the poppy sound than Sammy always gets blamed for. What's your take? And he also wants to let us know he's a young Van Halen fan. He's only 32, and he saw them in 2004 and also 3 other times with David Lee Roth in the reunion tours. Well, Mr. Dwayson, Jason the Dwayson Bay. Okay, this is what I think. Yes, if you listen to my interview with Sammy from 2017, it's episode number 22. Do yourself a favor and go back and listen to it. You can get it through Spotify, you can get it through iTunes. He addresses this issue directly. So it's basically, it comes down to this. That is what Eddie was writing at the time. Now, what does this mean? Does this mean that all those old Van Halen songs, if Sammy was the original singer, would come out the way they did? Obviously not, because Dave was the co-writer on those and he made them what they are. But you would still have that work from Ed, right? So you still have those riffs, this and that. I think Sam definitely would have had a more heavier vibe. There was definitely grittier music back then, but Ed was definitely working in a more pop direction when Sam came in the band. And in the interview that he does, he says straight up, that's what was going on, man. So for example, like, if you're a chef and someone's making pasta and it's like, hey man, we were having pasta that night and this is the sauce that I made. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's what was being served. And Eddie was the musical bass for it, and Sammy was doing the lyrics and the melodies, and he was writing lyrics and melodies over poppy tunes. Now, if Eddie was delivering him hard rock songs, maybe he would be having more hard rock songs and albums, but he worked with what Eddie gave him, and he was getting a lot of melodic pop stuff. And he says that in the interview. Please, anybody, you should check out that interview. It's very revealing. Episode 22. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, it was totally Eddie's call at that time. I mean, he was in charge of the music, and that was the direction he was going in. Well, if Sam didn't like it, he wouldn't have joined the band, but he was totally on board with it. So I don't think anybody ever made any other statement about that disagreed. It's very easy to say, well, Sam came in and turned it into a pop band. If you listen to Sammy's solo catalog before that, he was a rocker. I mean, admittedly, his Geffen albums took on more of a pop sheen than his Capitol albums did. But his Geffen albums were also better produced and the songs were better written. So, yeah, he definitely had an appreciation for what makes a good song, but there's no way Ed would have gone along with that if he didn't want to and he hadn't written the music already. So Sam is absolutely right when he's like, hey, listen, don't necessarily just blame me for that. Ed was writing the music at the time, and that was the kind of music he was writing, and that's what the rest of us in the band were on board and working with.
That's the truth. And that wraps up the mailbag segment. And we are on to our throwdown between Gary and Sammy, which is Sammy's 1997 album Marching to Mars versus Gary's Tribe of Judah Exit Elvis album, which came out in 2002. This is What Happens When You Get Let Go from Van Halen. And this is Sammy versus Gary in a